This conversation is sponsored by Fred J. Miller Incorporated, found at fjminc.com. Hi, everybody. This is Tim Hinton from Marching Arts Education and the Marching Roundtable podcast. Today, we're talking with three folks from the Walton High School Band of John Palmer. How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you for having us here.
Absolutely. John is the director of bands there at Walton. Also with him, Scott Brown. Scott, how are you?
Doing great. And thanks again, like John said, for having us do this.
Of course. And Ron Compton. How are you, Ron?
Great, thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. So we're talking about a band that loses an important and beloved member of their staff, and then how do you deal with that? How much that staff member meant. We're talking about James Pluth, who was beloved by many people in our activity, who we suddenly lost very recently. So John, thank you for reaching out to have a conversation. Obviously, James was a part of your staff, he and his wife, Lindsay, and made a big impact on all of you and your students. So we're going to be talking about that, and unfortunately, of that loss and how you've been dealing with it. Before we do that, why don't you introduce who's here on the call and what their role is there at Walton?
Sure. Scott Brown, he's our director of percussion here at Walton and the assistant band director at Dickerson Middle School, which is one of our schools that feeds us. We have Ron Compton, who is our head roadie. He's also a band parent. His daughter is in the front ensemble, and so worked with James very closely. And over the years, Ron has worked with James in order just to get all the pit equipment together and loaded on trucks and everything that we needed built. So he's worked with James for a long time.
So why don't you just start by describing the role that James had with your program and how long you had been working with him?
Sure. James is an integral part of the Walton Band program. He's our assistant percussion director. He's worked with our front ensemble. He's been our electronics person that runs everything. And for the past few years, he's also been our primary design coordinator. So James comes up with the show ideas. He puts the music together. Last couple of years, he's been our brass and front ensemble arranger. Of course, handles all of the electronics and soundscapes. Really, the last few shows have been James's, and he's really contributed and given a lot to our program and really helped move us in the direction that we've been going.
That's great. And Scott, am I correct that you were the one that sort of brought him into the fold?
Yes, absolutely. When I started here 11 years ago, I was coming from Lassiter, and we did not do a lot of electronics, and Walton was a little bit different. And I knew pretty early on I needed to hire somebody that could both teach the front ensemble and that was good with electronics. And James was actually still in college, but still came highly recommended, and brought him in 2012 to start working with the group during the summer. And a couple years later, he joined as the assistant percussion director. But yeah, I mean, it was I guess about 10 years working with him.
So that is a long relationship, and everybody got to know him. He was really part of your band family for sure. Ron, you are head roadie. That's a huge job, schlepping all the drum stuff around and making it all work. And that meant that you ended up working very closely with James.
Yeah, my daughter came on as a freshman, so I met him my freshman year coming in. My daughter would come back and say, "I'm scared to death of this guy. He's just frenetic energy and whatever." And the first time I got to meet him, I went up and somebody said, "Hey, go see, he needs something," and he just pointed and said, "Go do that." And that was kind of how my relationship was. He would just say, "Here's what we need," and we would just have to figure out how to go make that happen. But you wanted to do that for him. You wanted to please him because he was just adding so much to everything that was going on here at Walton, and bringing those kids along with him. So we loved him for that.
So John, James was well known for that energy and his personality and all that he brought in that way. Plus, of course, his expertise in his writing and designing and teaching. So let's talk about the impact that he had on your program during the time he was there.
Sure. As I mentioned, he really took over the role in the last few years of our lead designer. He would come in with 4 or 5 show ideas. In fact, I can remember we got on the bus after St. Louis into the year show a couple of years ago, and all everybody wanted to do was just kind of rest a little bit because the final show was over. And James pops up between the charter bus seats, and he's like, "Here are our ideas for next year." And the whole way back from St. Louis, he's sending me music, trying to get me to listen to stuff to think about the shows. He had already had 3 or 4 ideas that even looking into next year. So he was always thinking of new ways of presenting music and new ways of putting new ideas together. And he with his wife Lindsay Schuler. Lindsay's our visual coordinator, and she does all of our drill. And so they were a great team.
So obviously this is a huge shock to not only all of you on the staff who work with him, but all the students as well. So that has to be a challenge for you and your staff to, to deal with that and take care of your students. So how are you doing that? How have you been handling this and taking care of your students through this time?
Well, it was very rough. We found out that he passed away on a Friday, and we actually had an away game. And Dr. Schuler tried very hard not to let that news get out, because she wanted the kids to be able to go and have a run of the show and not have to suffer through that and too early. But word was getting around. We knew it was getting on social media. Some folks, very well intentioned, were reaching out. So we talked with our principal, and we actually brought the students back early from that game, so that they wouldn't find out about it through the rumor mill. And we sat them down, and we told them. And it was a very hard evening. The county was great. They sent counselors in when we told the students, and we even had a support dog here. And it was very difficult, especially for those Pitt students who worked so closely with him, the percussion students who've been with him for 4 years. They took it very hard, as you would expect. So we made sure everybody was taken care of that night. We brought all the parents in so they could be with their students. And then we had the weekend off, and we came back on Monday, and we took a time during our normal rehearsal time we wrote cards to Dr. Schuler and let the kids process, and had even more emotional support dogs and more counselors that came in. It was really amazing to see the students pull together. And I'm going to let Ron talk about this, because I think the entire percussion section pulled together in one neighborhood house, and kind of what they did that weekend.
Yeah, they did. They went Friday after we left school. Everybody was here. It was a tough, good hour and a half where everybody was just trying to process it here. And then, just kind of organically, they all gathered up. They're all pretty tight anyway. My daughter's best friends are all her friends in Pitt, and then a few of the Battery kids. But they all just gathered up. One of the parents opened their home, and they all went, and they were there till probably 2 a.m, just hanging out, talking, sharing memories. And they kept that going through the weekend. They went out Saturday night to the CV show. That was a tribute to James. I think a lot of them were there. And then Sunday night, they all went to dinner, ran over to we've got a little town square. They all went over and got food and sat and talked. And I think even Monday, after we had a shortened rehearsal here, that Mr. Palmer was talking about, they all went out after that again. I mean, they just really held each other up. And I think that was certainly for my daughter. She was very emotional, and that really helped her, kind of her to process it, to know that everybody was going through that same thing.
It's wonderful to see them take care of each other through this time that's so difficult. Scott, have you've seen that happen as well?
Absolutely. I mean, they're still a little emotional at times. Last night after our performance, there were tears. And as soon as they see that, with somebody else, they're immediately over there giving them a hug. They've really been doing an amazing job of looking out for each other and staying strong for each other, and celebrating, using this as an opportunity to celebrate James as well. There's a lot of happiness in that. This is his show, and this was something that he really believed in and was very passionate about. So that's kind of giving them some strength too. It gives them a purpose to work towards, to help them feel a little bit more comfort out of this. But they have been absolutely unbelievable, and every day they're a little bit stronger, and every day they're able to talk about things a little bit more, and they're great kids to begin with, so that helps as well.
Well, John, I appreciate you reaching out and sharing this story. And of course, we wanted to give a tribute to James because so many people in our activity all over the country were impacted by him and Lindsay, and he made such an impact. So I appreciate you wanting to share this story. I wondered if any of you had a favorite story about James that you'd like to share, just a moment that was particularly crazy or fun or moving or anything. Does anybody have one of those they want to share?
Absolutely. You work with somebody for 10 years, you definitely get to see a lot of antics. But one of the things that I think definitely just kind of sums James up the most, because like Ron was saying, he would just say, there, do this, or here, let's do this. And the way he would solve problems was very pragmatic. He didn't think about, the easiest way to do something or the cleanest way to do it. So he asked me one time to come help him get a sleeper sofa out of his apartment. And because I have a big car, so we were going to take it to the dump. It was on the 3rd floor, I believe, and had a winding staircase that went down, on the outside. And we started looking at it going, there's no way we're going to get this thing down that staircase. And so we looked at the balcony on the other side. The sofa wouldn't fit through the sliding glass door. So we're standing there looking at it, and James said, okay, let's just rip it apart. And all of his tools were at Walton. And I remember him grabbing a couple of kitchen knives, and I think he had a hammer, and we just sat there and basically ripped this thing apart to pieces. There was a lot of kicking, a lot of hitting things, and James just going over throwing chunks of wood and metal off the balcony onto the ground outside. And I'm sitting there going, dude, what about your neighbors? And he's like, what else are we going to do? And by the time it was done, it was just a absolutely massacre of a sofa all over the ground on the outside. But that was just kind of his, he was going to find a solution. There was never a problem that he didn't have a solution to. And sometimes his solutions were just absolutely hilarious. And I'll never forget that one. So there's my story.
That is fantastic. I have to tell you, I would think that could be a very satisfying experience to actually tear a sofa apart. I'm kind of like jealous because that seems like that could, and doing it with James, I'm sure was super fun and crazy, just because of who he was. John, I love that you shared this story, and I appreciate you sharing with us how you have been taking care of your students. I know you're going to continue to do that. Everything you've described seems exactly like how I would have wanted you to do it. What would you like to say as we're finishing this conversation about James?
James was such a part of the Walton band, and we laughed with him, we argued with him, we celebrated with him. Sometimes you don't know the effect someone has on you until they're gone, and we will be feeling the effect of losing James for a while, but it has truly been inspiring to watch these students come together, to watch the parents come together, watch the staff come together to continue what James would have wanted to go on. And it has truly brought the idea of band family together for us. And so, we will get through it together, and we will honor James, best we can throughout the course of the season and moving forward.
Well, John, thank you for having this conversation, and Scott and Ron, thank you for joining us and sharing your stories. I've enjoyed hearing this. James Pluth had a huge impact on so many people in our activity for such a long time, and I'm happy that we can share those stories and share his memory and honor him in this way. So thank you guys for talking with me today.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
James was always in the middle of some project. There was never an end to a James project ever. Like, I'm sitting here at his desk, and there's like a circuit board right there that's like, I don't know what this does.
Well, that's one of the ways they described him.
And
yeah, they described him as always having the next great idea and always having all that energy and excitement. I think that's really cool. Like, was he like that all the time? Like, just always full of the next thing?
Yep. And I mean, that's part of the reason that he and I worked well. Like, you really can't pull apart the fact that we worked together and we're married. Like, it was all just so intertwined. But even if I could do that, that's why he and I just worked well together, because he was the ideas and the dreamer, and I was the doer. So whatever he wanted to get done, he would just rattle off the biggest, best crazy idea he could come up with, and it was just like, hey, can you do this? And I was like, yeah. So that's just how it worked.
I love that you said that, because they said that's exactly the way he worked with them. Like Ron, the main roadie at Walton, was talking about, he just said, I need you to do this. And that was like, here's your task, go. And then everybody would, because his energy was so infectious.
Yeah, definitely. Until he got some other voice to be recorded, he would always record himself doing whatever narration he wanted, or sometimes he would sing stuff, and knowing that it wasn't going to be the final thing. But in part of the show, we're playing Show Yourself. It's from Frozen 2, but it's based on the arrangement that Vaktiv sung. And at one point he whispers, "Show yourself," and it's just nice.
That's very cool. So if we're watching the show, we'll know to listen for that.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that, because I'm looking forward to seeing their show, and it's nice to know that will be in there.
Yeah. Yeah, he's as a friend of mine who she actually marched with him at Bluecoats, and her and I worked together at Boston. She called him a secret softie, that he would always put on this like front of like lots of energy in your face, let's do these things, or like push an argument or like poke someone's buttons, but then like right behind that is the reason why. He just cared.
Right. And the things too, everybody knew. You know, that's what's so great. Like he had that facade perhaps, but everybody knew how much he cared. No question about that. That's what made him special.
Yeah.
One of the reasons. Thank you for talking to me. Is there anything you want to say to anybody that might be watching?
I don't know.
I think you said it.
Yeah.
This was fun. I've enjoyed getting to hear these stories and remember him. And of course, if there's anything that we can do, I know you have lots of people reaching out to support you.
Yeah.
You know,